Now that you know the basics for solving absolute value equations, I'm going to give you some examples of some tougher problems that you might encounter when you are solving your problems on Khan Academy. Here is our first example. In this example, we have x minus 8 and the absolute value on both sides of the equation. We are going to treat this like it was just an x, and we want to get those on the same side. So I'm going to add 5 x minus 8 in absolute value to both sides. When I do that, I get 9 times the absolute value of x minus 8. And that's on this side. So instead of bringing my negative 8 down, I am just going to go ahead and add 8 to both sides. So we'll do this in one step. So then I've got this equals, this is gone, 19 plus 8 is 27. Treating this absolute value like it's the variable by itself, meaning we want to get it by itself before we do anything. Well, I know I've got to get rid of this 9 times, so I'm going to divide by 9 to get rid of that, which makes this a 3 when I divide by 9. So I'm left with the absolute value of x minus 8 equals 3. Now going back to those basic rules that you learned in the previous video, we say, hey, what's inside that absolute value can be equal to 3, or it can be equal to negative 3. And then we solve those equations. If x minus 8 is equal to 3, I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and I'm going to get x is equal to 11. If x minus 8 equals negative 3, I'm going to add 8, and I'm going to get x is equal to positive 5. So our solution set is x equals 5 and 11. You can plug that in to both sides of the equation, plug both of them into both sides, and you will find that both of them work. So let's go on to our next example. In this example, we are going to try to get our absolute values of x minus 7 here on the same side. So I'm going to subtract 10 times the absolute value of x minus 7. It's going to get rid of it there. And over here, I'm going to have 5 times the absolute value of x minus 7. In the same line here, I'm going to get rid of my plus 4 by subtracting 4. So that's gone. And I can bring down my equals. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0. So I have 0 on that side. I can't leave it blank. I've got to put the 0 in there. If I want to get the absolute value by itself now, I need to divide by 5. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 0 divided by 5 is 0. So I have the absolute value of x minus 7 equals 0. There is no positive and negative 0, so I just need to take what's inside the absolute value and set it equal to 0. And it seems like here I only have one solution because the absolute value is equal to 0, which means it can only be equal to 0. If I take that number and I plug it into my equation above, it does work, and so that is our solution. Here is the final equation that we are going to solve on this video. And so here I see I've got the absolute value of x minus 2 on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 6. I like to keep things positive. So I'm going to add 6 times the absolute value of x minus 2. And I've got 10 times the absolute value of x minus 2. I am going to also, in this same line, get rid of this plus 5. So I'm going to subtract 5. Negative 9 minus 5 gives me a negative 14. And so my equation now is negative 14 equals 10 times the value of x minus 2. I need to divide by 10. When I do that, I get negative 1 4/10 equals the absolute value of x minus 2. And here's where I have my problem. Because absolute values is distance from 0, so it's always positive. And here is a negative. So this is impossible. So our solution is actually no solution. And you'll remember that might look like this. Brackets with a 0 with a line through it. Absolute values cannot be negative. So there is no number that works to make this equation true. That's all the examples I have for you. You may come across these exact problems in Khan Academy. Take your time on the problems. Work through them slowly and carefully. You're going to do great.